heavy stuff. Ooh, and I like that everybody's in there grinding it out. Love it, love it, love it. Big swings, big squats. Grüezi miteinander, Gregory von Lebe hier. I'm a professional kettlebell athlete as well as trainer, helping over 40s get strong, fit, and lean without going to the gym. If you want to learn more about my method, download my free ebook in the first link in the description. The goal of these videos is to cross-reference my real-life experience with social media hype, ultimately helping you make better decisions in your workout schedule. If you appreciate my light-hearted commentary, like the video and consider subscribing. All right, let's see what the Instagram algorithm has in store for me today, Mr. Icebox Kettlebell. Now, before I get my feedback to the bench press, I want to say that there's a lot of folks online, especially on social, that I have never heard of. And sometimes people reach out to me and send me a DM and say, well, have you heard of this guy? And I say no, and they're like, what? I can't believe it. But it's not that I know all these dudes and gals, and I'm assuming they don't know me as well. So it's not like that we all know each other. So let's focus on the bench press. Now, the bench press, there was a time in my workout schedule where I incorporated it a lot. And I think it's a cool way. It's a circus lift. It's a special lift that requires a lot of kinesthetic literacy. And what he says right here, he says he goes into a deep rabbit hole of the bench press. And I think that's cool. If you have a certain lift that is really fascinating to you and you want to learn everything about it and really drill yourself deep into the exercise, go ahead and do it. And I actually like that seated variation, which adds another layer of difficulty on it. Now, from my personal perspective, I stopped doing the bench press because it's, for me, rather a circus lift than anything else. I'd like to concern myself with bringing 2 bells overhead as heavy as possible and using my legs to do the job to make sure that I have 80 to 90% of volume ending overhead, which I believe gives me the most bang for my buck. But my main man right here, if he enjoys the lift, nothing wrong with it, and it's hell of a lot of strength that he puts on display. Now, my main man, Sportler, I think he's a German dude, and I've seen and heard about this guy. And this is the halo exercise, is something that I have my gripe with a little bit. Because for certain people who have tight shoulders, I think it does more harm than good in certain situations. We have, for example, a couple of clients that are so tight in the shoulders that even when they do the exercise with a stick where they go around the head, that they struggle with it. That doesn't mean that the halo is a bad exercise. It just means that it's another one of those lifts that people talk about often and then demonstrate it often, but it's an exercise that I rarely do. Sometimes I think a couple of workouts ago, we did it in a workout of the week. But since then, that's probably like 6 or 8 weeks ago, I never used it again. Doesn't mean that I never use it, but it's not that often. It doesn't belong into my Big 10. That's what a lot of people do in the kettlebell sphere, is combining different exercises together. And I think that's cool, especially a seated press or this in that half kneeling windmill position press. And we could call this a half kneeling windmill that he engages himself in. It's part of the Turkish get up. Now, I'm a big fan of pressing, and I just like the press standing. And a kneeling press or a half kneeling windmill press or whatever you want to call it, I can't move heavy weights like this. And like I mentioned before, I always make sure I want to press heavy weights overhead and keep them there as long as possible. A part of the Turkish get up. Now, like I said, my opinion about the Turkish get up, I think it's a circus exercise like the bench press, and it's not in my top 10. It's not the Big 10 exercises that I do. It looks fancy, it looks cool, but it doesn't deliver any type of benefits over the big basics like the press, the swing, the squat, or the snatch. Russian twist, an exercise that I used to demonize because I came from this idea that is typical to Dr. Stuart McGill's world, where he talks about that rotation with weights is a problem. Certain people want to make everything strong. This is something that Ed Cohn once said, which I think is fascinating. And if you are very strong and if built up a level of expertise and strength, there might be areas where you want to get stronger at, so you do different and unconventional exercises, and that's one of them. Again, not my top 10. And finally, just a double-handed press, and he grabs it with the handle pointing towards the floor and the bell up. Now, what I like to do is I insert both of my thumbs inside the window of the kettlebell. I grab the kettlebell with my fingers then, and I press it from the palms up. And the reason why I do it is because I have the most stable grounds to do so. Nothing wrong with this. I just prefer a safer and more stable way. And just in case if you're wondering what kind of kettlebell I'm using, it's the Pro Kettlebell by my friend Nikolai Puchlov, proudly made in the USA. Check the link in the description to get your Pro Kettlebell right now. And don't forget to use our code Lebe to get 10% off your next purchase. All right, single arm press, 5 reps per arm. Love it, but I don't like his hand insertion. Alternating row. What I like to do is hang rows. A lot of time on attention, not alternating it, not giving my body any type, or the lats, any type of rest, because the lats are pretty strong muscles, and I always do hang rows because I want these big muscles to move as much weight as possible and to engage into as much or as much time on attention as possible. Nothing wrong with the alternating row. I just like more time on attention. Floor presses are awesome. One thing that I want to recommend though is I always do floor presses with one side, especially if I use a heavy kettlebell, because then I have the possibility to drop it down into the so-called fetal position where I don't hurt myself if I have both kettlebells in the rack. Might be a little bit tricky for some people. I'm trying to wrap my head around it a little bit. All right, kettlebell flow, tactical snatch. Man, that hand insertion. Rotational snatch and repeat. So that's one of those. Totally fine with that flow. I like the circle snatch, not a big fan of this. The tactical snatch, it's so funny that they call it tactical. Why not call it hand-to-hand snatch? Or the hand-to-hand clean, when you immediately switch into the backswing and then overhead. I will call this, I refer to this as a hand-to-hand clean or a hand-to-hand snatch. Now, this type of flow, that's typical to Instagram stuff, right? Nothing wrong with it, but what I rather want to do is I want to use, especially for my level of fitness, I want to use heavy weights, snatch them overhead, press them overhead, rotational stuff, just when you work with one side only, right? So you have this one position, the unilateral position where you press weights overhead. This is rotation in and all by itself, because one side is working and the other one is working hard to keep you stable. So that's one thing. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with rotational exercises, but I think there's a little bit, people exaggerate it to a certain extent, and especially with kettlebells. And what I rather do is, I love the thruster, powerful exercise, but I use a heavy thruster, go up, down, and jerk it back up. That's one thing that a cool flow that I like. But this rotational stuff, that's rather like a typical Instagram influencer workout. I rather want to break these exercises down and then have them do a snatch, then have them do a thruster, and then have them do a press. Like I said, nothing wrong if you have the ability to do this, but flows, not a big fan of it. Apex Liverpool, heavy stuff. Ooh, and I like that everybody's in there grinding it out. Love it, love it, love it. Big swings. Big squats, man. And, oh man, that's a crusher. That's the type of flow that I like. And see, there's a lot of people doing it. So a swing, then a squat, then dropping the bell down, then doing some push-ups. I actually came up with this flow as well. That's one thing that you can do with these heavy bells, right? And kudos to squatting that thing, cleaning it up and then squatting it. Bam, I appreciate that. That's big stuff. I appreciate that. Moving heavy weights, having a solid combination of exercises, heavy swing, heavy squat, push-up, and that's what I want to talk about, right? You don't have to use that of a heavy kettlebell, but this flow, if you call it like this, or this complex, swing, squat, and then a push-up, gives you 10,000 times more return on investment than the video or the flow that we just saw before. All right, so that's it for today's reaction. I really appreciate these videos, and I actually see that I get inspiration too. And like I mentioned, as I say in the beginning, this is lighthearted commentary. Don't take it the wrong way. I think we are allowed to talk about each other and give each other feedback. And I think it also makes sense to have an expert out there who maybe can cut through the chase and explain to especially beginners, because we have a lot of beginners on the channel right here. Tell them what makes sense and what doesn't. And what I also realize is maybe I see some folks that I can invite on the podcast. So this Apex Liverpool guy, or maybe that was the club, but this type of flow, man, that's big stuff. Really loved it. Here's the next thing that you have to do. Clean and press that like and subscribe button. Share with a friend who's also interested in kettlebells. And if you made it this far, download my free ebook in the first link in the description called The Kettlebell Code. If you're over 40, 50, or 60, you don't have a lot of time, but you still want to take care of your fitness, this is where the kettlebell comes in. And I have a shortcut for you in my free ebook. So download it right now. It's in the first link in the description, and it's 100% free.